Hey all, it's David Ducker coming back at you. Today I'm doing a comparison video. RPGs versus video games. I've already done a video called The Media is the Message, comparing different media, but thought I would do one more specifically, a little bit shorter perhaps. So let's start out. I want to talk about video games. I love video games. They're awesome. In a video game, you can have very complex mechanics. You can have a whole slew of different moves your character can do, spells, abilities, qualities, feats, whatever. And you just hit a button, he executes them immediately. You get to see an awesome graphic on screen. He spins around with his sword. Maybe you hit one button and he does a 1, 2, 3 with a spear. You get to hear the clang of steel. You get to hear him walking around and sliding through the mud and the squishing of his boots on the mud. He has his battle cry that he might say a different battle cry for each move. You get to see the enemies and how they're attired, how they're armored. To see the interaction when you swing and they parry. You can see that on the screen instantaneously. And they've got shadow and light and color and sound and motion and voice. You got voice acting. There have been a lot of big name actors who did voice acting for games, and a lot of unknown actors who've done great voice acting for games. Can really convey their character, and they all have extremely different sounding voices. You get the orchestra going on. You get a musical soundtrack. The battle music kicks in. You know something's going on. The final boss has his own theme song. And whenever you hear it, you think back to that moment when you first saw him appear in the cinematic. The cinematic with these big production values. You can have multiple characters, swap them in and out, try different builds. You can go through long dungeons. Get some survival horror going on. There's a plethora of things a video game can do, and they do so well. I love video games. And I also love role-playing games. But everything I just mentioned, role-playing games don't do well, or not as well as video games. There's no graphics. There's very limited voice acting available to most groups. There's fairly limited orchestral score available to most groups. And any kind of mechanic you use has to be calculated by hand. So you roll your dice, you add your mods, you compare, you come back and forth, and then you finally get the result. That takes time. It's not instant gratification the way it is in a video game. You have to think about it. And whenever you're thinking about mechanics, your head comes up out of that world and into the real world, if only for that short span of time. So it's an immersion breaker, a momentum killer. So video games don't do these things well. Combat, long dungeon crawls, survival horror to a large extent, they don't do well. So my answer to that is don't focus on those things. You don't want to overpower a grizzly bear. You don't want to outrun a cheetah because you will fail at these things. But you can overpower a cheetah and you can outrun a grizzly bear. Play to the strengths of your media. With role-playing games, the player characters can be anything they imagine. They're not limited by a selection of faces, a selection of clothing, a selection of weapons. They are limited only by their imagination. If they can think about it, they can play as that character. Same thing with their feats, abilities, fighting style. They're not limited by what's in the book. They're not limited by what the game designers pre-programmed. If they can think about it, they can put it in the game. They can say, I want to fight with the 3-section staff, kung fu style. And that might not be in the game, but because you're a person and not a computer, you could put it in the game. You can find a way to make that 3-section staff fit into the world, into the plot, into the fighting style. He can think of his own finishing moves if he wants to, that and just expand on that and make it just as detailed as any other fighting style. So too, because you're a person, not a computer, you have unlimited interactivity. There's no dialogue tree that you're restricted to. You can say anything. They can say anything to you. And you can go back and forth rapid fire and not have to think about which dialogue tree fits my character best. You don't have to think about that. It's all intuitive. It's real time. It's amazing. So in those areas, the customization and the interactivity, role-playing games will always beat video games. So that is what you need to focus on when you're coming in and you're saying you want to run a role-playing game. You want to let them do as much as they possibly can to customize their character. You want to provide a story that's as interactive as possible, where they determine the ending. Perhaps where they determine the beginning and the middle and the ending, and you're just there to referee as the GM. It's a collaborative experience. You've got all these different brains sitting around the table, each feeding plot points and characters, history, goals, momentum, entertainment into this game. It's not a one-man show. So all of these things together allow role-playing games to, in their own way, be better than video games. You can beat a video game at interactivity. You can beat a video game at customization. You cannot beat a video game at combat mechanics, because they do them faster than you ever could. They have animations, sound effects, and orchestral scores. They have battle cries from different voice actors. So these are things you can't compete with. So don't try. Defeat them in the ground that you're strong at. So that's pretty much my point. And secondarily, just about competition. Your players have access to a plethora of video games. They also have other entertainment media. They could read a book. They could watch a movie. They could go to a party. They could go to the bar. They could go to a jiu-jitsu gym or a powerlifting gym. They could take a jog. They could go on a date with a girl. As a GM, you're competing with all these other entertainment medium, all these other forms of entertainment. You're in direct competition. If Saturday night comes up and a pretty girl calls me and says she wants to go on a date, but I got your game scheduled, if your game is not going to be as much fun as this date, I'm not going to go to your game. I'm going to call you and say, I can't make it tonight. Something came up. I'm going to take off. Maybe a pretty girl is not a good analogy because it's hard to beat that. But if it's your buddy saying, let's go to the bar, or if it's just that copy of Skyrim just sitting there by your Xbox and you're thinking to yourself, I think Skyrim is actually more fun than this guy's game because he's giving me hack and slash, dungeon crawl, but Skyrim does all that better than he does. So I'm going to stay at home. I'm not going to have to drive through the snow. I'm not going to buy chips. Not going to sit on an uncomfortable chair at a kitchen table. Not going to, have to shower and shave and interact with other human beings. I'm just going to play Skyrim. I'll have just as much fun, but it's cheaper, it's less time, less effort, less energy. So that's what they're going to do. You've got to give them something Skyrim cannot. You got to give them something nobody else can. And that's going to be the role-playing, the interactivity, the customization. Give them that, and they'll always be coming back because they can't get that anywhere else, except other GMs, which is, of course, also why you got to be better than them. But at least beat the video game, or you're in big trouble. I've got players waiting to get into my game. I don't have to worry about canceling because not enough people showed up. I don't have to worry about finding people, tracking them down, no call, no show. I don't have to worry about that because I've given them something they can't get anywhere else. I've cornered the market. So I want you to corner the market so you don't have to worry about that either. So not only do you have 5 players that'll show up, but you've got 15 that want to show up, and you get to pick the 5 best, the 5 that you like the best, the 5 that are the most effective at role playing. That's what I want for you is success. So I want you to beat out Skyrim, World of Warcraft, and all these other things. But in order to do that, you have to play to the strength of your media. And our media is role-playing games. It's voice and dice and paper and a human mind and a group of human minds sitting around a table. So there are some things that does way better than any video game, and there are some things you can't compete with a video game on. Power gaming, a video game is always going to beat you. But if you're hitting that immersion of role-playing, the dialogue tree will never defeat you. So that's all I got to say about that. I hope everybody has a good day on YouTube land. Cheers.